If I text you right now and I say that the final score of a match was 2-1, I have told you the absolute undeniable truth.
Right. Right. The math is right there on the screen.
Exactly. But if I call you up and say that a scrappy, exhausted underdog just mounted this miraculous last-minute comeback to win 2-1, well, I haven't just told you the truth anymore.
No, you've told a story.
I've told a story. And today's deep dive into our curriculum framework, it proves something I find just endlessly fascinating, which is that we, as human beings, we don't actually watch sports for the truth.
Not at all.
We watch them for the story.
It is such a profound distinction, really, because when you look at the progression of the language we use to describe athletics, which, is the framework we are dissecting today, you start to realize something.
Yeah.
Our vocabulary, it stretches and contorts to accommodate the expanding boundaries of our own psychology. Like, we are examining this multi-level linguistic guide today, moving from foundational beginner concepts all the way up to, absolute master.
Right, from A2 up to C1 and C2.
Exactly. But what we're really doing here is mapping human cognition. You just cannot describe a multi-dimensional emotional experience with one-dimensional words.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because, on the surface, we are looking at an English language curriculum for sports.
Yes, a literal language guide.
Right. And it's broken down into tiers. We've got A2, B1, B2, and then C1, C2. So the beginner up to the master. But we aren't here to just read a dictionary to you.
No, that would be incredibly boring.
Totally.
Yeah.
We are here to trace how a simple game, played on a patch of grass by some kids, expands word by word, tier by tier, into this massive global sociocultural ecosystem.
We are tracking a journey of engagement, really. We start as purely physical participants, just bodies in motion.
Just running around.
Right. And then we transform into emotional investors. From there, we are forced to become analytical observers just to make sense of our emotions.
Which is a huge leap.
It is. And finally, at the highest tier of language, we evolve into societal critics.
So let's start at the absolute bottom. The literal building blocks. Because to understand the societal impact of a multi-billion-dollar stadium, you first have to understand the dirt it's built on, right?
That's a good way to look at it.
The foundational tier, what this framework calls the A2 level, is entirely grounded in physical reality. We are just like pointing at things and naming them.
Mm-hmm.
And I find the way we categorize physical movement right out of the gate to be bizarrely specific.
You're referring to the structural verbs of activity, I assume.
Yes, it is incredibly specific. At a foundational level of understanding, our language demands that we separate human movement into 3 distinct categories, like we play, we go, and we do.
Right.
Think about this for a second. If you are learning to talk about sports, you have to memorize that you play football, tennis, or basketball.
Yeah.
But you go swimming, running, or cycling.
Yes.
And then, completely differently, you do karate or you do yoga.
Mm-hmm.
Why does human language demand that separation? Like, why can't I just say, I go basketball?
Well, because language is subconsciously categorizing the existential nature of the activity.
The existential nature.
Yeah, let's break it down. When you use the word play, what are the requirements? You are almost always interacting with an external object.
Like a ball.
A ball, a puck, whatever. But more importantly, play implies a negotiation with chance. There is this playful unpredictability to it.
Oh, I see.
You hit a tennis ball, it catches the wind, maybe it hits the net tape. You are reacting to chaos in real time.
Okay, so play requires a partner, even if that partner is just gravity or a bouncing ball. But when I go running, I'm not negotiating with a ball.
Precisely. Go implies continuous linear momentum. You are propelling yourself forward through space. It is a singular trajectory.
Right.
You go running, you go cycling, you are just moving from point A to point B. And then, of course, you have the verb do.
Right, like I do martial arts.
Exactly. To do martial arts or to do gymnastics implies a structured internal discipline.
Internal discipline. Okay.
You aren't playing with the chaotic chance of a bouncing ball, and you aren't just propelling yourself endlessly forward. You are executing a precise, practiced form. The movement is entirely internal. It's about mastering the self, not mastering an object or a distance.
That distinction blew my mind when I really sat with it. I mean, we're separating chaotic interaction, linear momentum, and internal discipline before we even step onto a field.
Right. It's all baked into the very first words we use.
And once we are on the field, this foundational A2 language establishes this brutally absolute architecture. 2 teams, points, a score, a winner, a loser. The final result is 2-1.
It is a completely binary universe at this level. You are either a player on the grass or you're a fan in the stadium. The setting is defined, the roles are defined, and the outcome is mathematically undeniable.
I actually think this A2 level, this totally objective reality, is the absolute purest form of any sport.
Really?
Yeah. Think of this level like the painted white lines on a soccer field.
Mm-hmm.
Those lines are physical, undeniable boundaries. I'd argue that once you move past this, once you start adding emotion and narrative, you actually sort of ruin the truth of the game. A goal is a goal. One is greater than zero. That's the only truth that matters.
Well, I have to push back hard on that idea of purity.
Why?
Yes, the painted lines give us a comforting illusion of absolute truth. But is that objective language actually capable of capturing the human experience of the event?
I mean, it captures the facts.
Sure. If I hand you a sheet of paper that just says Team A2, Team B1, I have given you a mathematical fact. But I haven't told you anything about the event itself.
You've told me who won.
I've told you the outcome, but not the experience. Was it a grueling, miserable slog in the mud?
Right.
Was it an elegant display of athletic perfection? Was it heartbreaking? A baseline vocabulary simply gives you the tools to say, I play tennis on weekends, it's fun. Or, I watch the Olympics because my country won a medal.
Which is very surface level.
Extremely surface level. It's casual observation.
So you're saying a game without context is just people running around in a grassy rectangle.
Exactly. To make those literal physical actions actually matter to a human being, you have to introduce stakes. You have to introduce emotion. And the moment you introduce emotion, the A2 vocabulary completely fails you. You need a new linguistic toolkit.
And that failure is what forces us into the next tier, which the framework calls the B1 Explorer.
Right.
This is where we move from being a casual participant to making a serious emotional investment. And I love thinking about this linguistic shift as a physical movement through a stadium facility.
Oh, I like that.
Right. In the first year, we were standing right on the painted lines. We're on the field.
Yeah.
But now we've walked off the field. We're sitting in the stands or we are sweating in the practice gym.
That's a brilliant way to visualize it because the architecture of the conversation completely shifts here. We are no longer talking about a single isolated game on a Tuesday afternoon. We suddenly introduce the concepts of tournaments and championships,
which links isolated events together into a timeline.
Precisely. Suddenly, a championship creates a hierarchy of importance. The game you play today matters immensely for the game you will play next month.
Because it's all connected now.
Yes. And to survive that hierarchy, a new concept emerges. Preparation.
Training. Practicing. The introduction of the coach and the personal trainer.
Consider the psychological leap required just to invent the word training.
How so?
Well, the beginner plays for fun in the present moment, but an athlete who trains is fundamentally future-oriented.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Right. To train means you are deliberately sacrificing your present comfort. You are enduring pain and exhaustion today for a hypothetical championship that doesn't even exist yet.
That's intense.
The vocabulary shifts us from existing in the present tense to building toward the future tense.
Here is where it gets really complicated, though, for me. Along with that future orientation, this B1 tier introduces qualitative assessments. We stop just saying a player hit the ball. We start judging the action.
Yes, the judgment begins.
We talk about a great pass or a fantastic shot. We categorize athletes on a spectrum from beginner up to talented, skillful, or a pro. But doesn't the introduction of words like skillful instantly destroy the objective reality we just talked about?
It shatters it entirely.
Right, because if I say, that was a fantastic shot, I am injecting my own subjective opinion into the physics of the game. We are now judging the quality of the human, not just the math of the scoreboard.
And that is the inevitable price of emotional investment. When you care deeply about an outcome, you literally cannot view the action objectively anymore.
You just can't.
Your desperate desire for your team to win colors your perception of their skill. And look at how the vocabulary for the fans evolves alongside this. You are no longer just a casual watcher. You become supporter or a follower.
There is a specific phrase in our framework that perfectly captures this leap. It's a simple sentence, but it carries so much weight. The phrase is, I've been a supporter of this club since I was a child.
That sentence is a linguistic earthquake, honestly.
A linguistic earthquake.
Yes. Think about all the baggage packed into those words, since I was a child. It introduces deep time, loyalty, and most importantly, identity.
Identity, right.
The listener's personal history is now inextricably intertwined with the history of a sports club.
But with that identity comes vulnerability. Like, The framework highlights this emotional binary. The beginner just felt fun, but the invested supporter feels excited when they win and deeply disappointed when they lose.
The emotional stakes are raised.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's a great hypothetical scenario built into this tier of the curriculum. It's a fan waiting for a tournament final. And they say they are so excited, but also very nervous. They're relying on their coach and a star player who has been training so hard.
I want you to linger on that word. Nervous. Why is the fan nervous?
Because they want to win.
But the casual tennis player hitting a ball on a Sunday morning doesn't feel crippling anxiety, right?
Right.
The invested fan feels nervous because they have staked a piece of their ego, a piece of their very identity, on an outcome they have absolutely no physical control over. They are sitting in the stands, completely helpless. The stakes are immense.
But here's the problem. When you are that invested and your team loses man, it hurts. The pain of a loss or even the intense euphoria of a victory is so overwhelming that it demands an explanation.
Yes, you need answers.
You can't just sit in the stands and feel the pain.
Yeah.
You have to explain to yourself why it happened. Why did my team break my heart? Why did that talented player miss that fantastic shot?
And basic emotion words cannot answer those questions. Crying or cheering doesn't explain causality.
No.
To protect your ego, you have to decode the mechanics of the failure or the success.
Which catapults us into the B2 tier. We have to become analysts.
We shift from feeling the game to decoding the narrative arc of the game. This is the realm of strategy.
We get a whole new toolkit here. We move past the idea of just training hard and start talking about a team's tactics, their game plan. We start differentiating between playing defensively, which is, focusing entirely on neutralizing the threat of the other team, versus playing offensively, actively trying to dismantle them to score.
And we also start deconstructing the human athlete in a much more clinical way.
Clinical is a good word for it.
Right, because at the previous level, we just called them talented as a sort of vague, magical compliment. But analytical language requires us to dissect them. We isolate their physical attributes.
Speed, strength,
Stamina, endurance. And crucially, for the very first time, we separate the body from the mind. We introduce mental attributes like composure and calmness under pressure.
I find that separation fascinating. Why do we need to separate a player's stamina from their composure just to understand a game?
Because recognizing psychological weight is the only way to explain a collapse.
Oh, that makes sense.
Imagine a player who has run faster and hit harder than anyone else for 89 minutes. Physically, their speed and stamina are unmatched.
They are machine.
Right. But in the final minute, they face an empty net, they panic, and they miss. A physical vocabulary cannot explain that miss. The body was perfectly capable.
But the mind wasn't.
Exactly. It is only by introducing the concept of composure that we can understand how the mind can suddenly betray a perfectly capable body due to the sheer pressure of the moment.
We are basically becoming commentators at this point, and this is where the language becomes incredibly theatrical. I like to call this the storyteller's toolkit.
I like that.
We start identifying the turning point of a match. We talk about the dramatic comeback, where a team surges from the brink of defeat. And, of course, the triumph of the underdog.
This vocabulary is profound because it reveals that human beings are fundamentally incapable of accepting chaos.
Wait, really? How so?
Well, when we watch a game, it is, in objective reality, just a series of random, chaotic, isolated physical collisions on a field. But words like turning point, comeback, and underdog impose a rigid narrative structure onto that chaos.
We are making it a movie.
We project a story onto the randomness so our brains can actually digest it.
I want to use a chess analogy here because I think it perfectly tracks this evolution for you, the listener. Think about learning chess. The A2 foundational tier is just learning the rules of physical movement. You memorize that the knight moves in an L shape, the bishop moves diagonally. It's just physical facts.
The painted lines.
The painted lines. And then the B1 emotional tier is knowing that you desperately want to capture the opponent's king and feeling your heart rate spike when your queen is in danger. You are invested.
Yes, the emotion is there.
But this B2 analytical tier, this is when you stop looking at the wooden shapes of the pieces entirely. You start seeing the invisible lines of tension connecting them across the board. You aren't seeing a knight and a bishop. You are seeing tactics. You are seeing offensive pressure and defensive traps.
You are seeing the invisible system operating beneath the surface of the physical action.
Exactly.
But there is a massive vulnerability in that system, and it brings us to one of the most critical elements introduced at this level, the variables of authority.
Oh, by
The referees and the umpires.
Oh, this is the most devastating realization in all of sports fandom. The framework explicitly introduces the concept of a referee making a controversial decision. I want you, the listener, to really think about this for a second. Think about a time a subjective, highly controversial call by an umpire completely ruined a game for you.
We've all been there.
Your team is mounting the perfect comeback, the underdog is about to win the championship, and then a whistle blows. A human in a striped shirt makes a subjective judgment call, and your entire reality falls apart.
It shatters the illusion we built at the very beginning.
Exactly. Imagine being a kid learning the rules. A painted line is a line. It's absolute truth. Now imagine being an adult sitting in the stands, realizing that the painted line only matters if a deeply flawed, tired human being looking through a specific angle says it matters. That is a total loss of innocence.
It really is.
A controversial decision reminds us that the entire rigid architecture of the game is upheld by nothing more than a fragile, subjective human agreement.
And this is perfectly illustrated by a post-game summary example in our framework. It reads like pure drama. Quote, "It was a hard-fought match. The home team dominated the first half, but the visitors made a spectacular comeback, scoring the winning goal in the final minutes."
When fans analyze that drama, they layer in the strategy. They argue that the turning point was a tactical substitution by the coach. They debate whether the young player's speed overwhelmed the defense, or if the winning goal was truly a masterclass in composure.
It is a complete, holistic analysis of the event on the field. You have the tactics, the physical and mental breakdown of the athlete, the narrative arc, and the emotional payoff. You have perfectly analyzed the game.
But human curiosity is a relentless thing. It rarely stops at the edge of the field. Once you can perfectly analyze the game on the grass, you start looking up.
You have to.
You look past the players, past the referee, past the painted lines. You look at the stadium itself. You look at the corporate logos plastered on the walls. You look at the television cameras broadcasting the signal. You begin to question the invisible, massive societal structures that allow the stadium to exist in the first place.
Which requires an entirely new, incredibly complex vocabulary. We have to ascend to the C1, C2 summit.
The master tier.
We are leaving the field entirely. We are entering the ecosystem of business, ethics, science, and society.
Let's stick with our facility analogy. We started on the grass, we moved to the stands, and then to the analyst's desk. Now we are in a helicopter hovering a mile above the stadium.
I love that.
We are looking at the traffic jams outside, the corporate blimp in the sky, and the satellite dishes beaming the game to millions. We are looking at sport as a macro industry.
We have become sports theorists, and the language immediately drops us into the deep end of commercialization. We are no longer talking about passing a ball. We are talking about sponsorship deals, broadcasting rights, and merchandise sales.
But this tier doesn't just give us business jargon. It gives us the vocabulary for deep cultural critique. There is a striking example provided in the framework. It says, some purists argue that the intense commercialization of football has eroded its traditional community values.
I really want to examine the specific verb used there. Eroded.
Eroded, yeah, that's a strong word.
To gradually wear away over time like water against a stone. In the beginner tiers, language was instantaneous. A shot is taken, a goal is scored, a referee blows a whistle, boom, split-second causality.
Right, instant feedback.
But erode implies a systemic, virtually invisible change occurring over decades. This C1, C2 language allows us to perceive time on a massive macro scale.
That's a great point.
It allows us to track the slow, painful shift of a sport from a local community pastime played by neighbors to a slick, global corporate product owned by billionaires.
It is the language of slow-moving tectonic plates.
Yeah.
And with that macro view comes the crushing weight of ethical dilemmas. The most prominent one highlighted in the source material here is the use of performance-enhancing drugs doping.
Yes, a very heavy topic.
The language provided is heavy. It says, the prevalence of doping in professional cycling raises serious questions about the integrity of the sport and the welfare of its athletes.
Again, look at the precise vocabulary required to express this thought. Prevalence.
The prevalence of doping.
The condition of being common, widespread, or deeply ingrained. We aren't talking about one bad athlete making one bad choice in a locker room. We are using language to diagnose a systemic infection within the entire institution of the sport.
And the concerns have escalated astronomically.
Yeah.
At the A2 level, the only concern was, did the ball go in the net?
Simple as that.
But at this mastery level, the concern is, does the concept of the net even matter if the integrity of the content is a lie? We are questioning whether the humans playing the game are fundamentally destroying their own welfare to achieve an unnatural standard.
It's a dark, complex linguistic toolkit. It requires an understanding of the terrifying intersection between basic human frailty and immense, crushing financial pressure. We're not taking sides here on the politics of it all, but the framework shows us how the language evolves to even allow us to debate it.
Exactly. We're just reporting on how the vocabulary shifts to handle these massive concepts. And that intersection of frailty and pressure is exactly where modern science enters the fray. Because at this level, athletes aren't just training anymore. They're being biologically optimized.
It becomes a science project.
The vocabulary expands into biomechanics, sports psychology, and nutrition.
The athlete is no longer viewed as just a person with stamina or a talented kid from the neighborhood. They are viewed as a complex biological machine, constantly monitored, analyzed, and fine-tuned by a team of specialized sports scientists in a laboratory setting.
Okay, I have to jump in here. Because as we talk about this, I feel a real sense of loss.
The loss.
Yeah, I have to push back against this hyper-intellectualization. When we are sitting here debating broadcasting monopolies, breaking down the biomechanical torque of a swing, and agonizing over the ethical prevalence of synthetic testosterone, haven't we lost the plot?
I see what you mean.
Do we risk losing the simple, joyful A2 reality of just kicking a ball around a park with your friends? Are we ruining the beautiful game by obsessively overanalyzing its ecosystem?
That is a profoundly valid concern. When you pull the curtain back and stare at the cold, calculating machinery of corporate sponsorships and scientific optimization, the innocent magic of the game absolutely fades.
It does. It feels cynical.
It feels very cynical. The joy of a weekend match feels galaxies away from a boardroom negotiation over television rights. But, and this is a big but, we cannot afford to look away because sport itself is no longer just a game.
What is it then?
It is a massive socio-cultural force. We need these complex words because sports impact global society on an unprecedented scale.
You're right. And the framework forces us to acknowledge this. It points out that sports operate as a tool for international diplomacy. Think of the Olympics, where nations that might otherwise be at war agree to compete under a unified set of rules. Sports act as massive, highly visible platforms for social protest.
But there's a glaring paradox embedded in this societal impact. The framework introduces a term that I think captures the danger of sports perfectly.
Right.
Sporting tribalism.
Sporting tribalism, the idea that a team becomes a surrogate tribe.
Exactly. On a global stage, like the Olympics, sport is used as a diplomatic bridge to unite different cultures.
Oh.
But zoom in on a single city with two rival football clubs.
What?
That exact same sport, with the exact same rules, acts as a catalyst for vicious, localized division. You have neighbors hating neighbors based purely on the color of a jersey.
It proves that the sport itself is completely hollow. It's a neutral vessel. A football doesn't inherently contain peace, and it doesn't inherently contain violence. It is just a ball.
Just an object.
The C1C2 language allows us to see how we, as a society, pour our own vastly different agendas, our desire for unity or our appetite for tribal warfare, into that neutral vessel.
Which brings us to the final, most profound leap in our linguistic journey. We move from sociology into pure philosophy.
The ultimate summit.
Once you see that sport is a neutral vessel, you have to ask the ultimate question. What is the true value of filling that vessel? Why do we care so much?
Right. What's the point of it all?
Is sport merely physical excellence? Is it just a highly lucrative branch of the entertainment industry? Or is it fundamentally about character building?
To explore that, the framework reaches all the way back to antiquity. It references the ancient Greek ideal, a sound mind and a sound body.
This is a foundational philosophical concept. The Greeks believed there was an intrinsic, undeniable link between physical prowess, pushing the body to its absolute limits, and intellectual and moral virtue.
They saw them as connected.
Deeply connected. They believed that the suffering, discipline, and dedication required to sculpt an elite athletic body would naturally, inevitably, forge an honorable and moral soul.
I want to debate this.
Yeah.
Because I look at that ancient Greek ideal, the idea that being good at sports makes you a good person, and I want to laugh. It feels incredibly naive.
Naive.
Think about the C1C2 vocabulary we just learned. We just talked about intense commercialization eroding traditional community values. We just talked about the widespread prevalence of doping, where athletes risk their lives and lie to the world just to get an edge.
That is true.
How can the Greek ideal possibly hold up? Does the pursuit of physical prowess truly lead to moral virtue in today's environment? Or has the pursuit of billions of dollars in profit severed the mind from the body entirely?
You have articulated the central agonizing tension of modern athletics. The Greek ideal is beautiful, but it operates on the assumption that the athlete is pursuing excellence for its own sake.
Which they aren't anymore.
When you introduce the corrupting influence of broadcasting billions, lucrative shoe contracts, and the biochemical arms race of doping, the pressure to win doesn't naturally forge an honorable soul. It often actively corrupts it.
So the pursuit of the sound body might actually destroy the sound mind.
Often, yes. And the beauty of this linguistic framework is that we wouldn't even be able to have this argument without the vocabulary we've built today.
That's a really good point.
If we only had A2 language, we could only say the runner was fast. We wouldn't have the words to ask if the runner was morally compromised by the systemic pressures of commercialization.
It is truly incredible how far we have traveled in this deep dive. Let's synthesize this journey because it is a masterclass in human learning.
It really is.
We started with our feet in the mud at the A2 level. We learned the basic physical verbs of kicking a ball and counting points. Just the raw, undeniable, objective reality of the painted lines.
Then our hearts got involved.
Right. We ascended into the B1 level. We added the emotional heartbeat of fandom, the anxiety of the stands, and the future-focused language of training and sacrifice. We started judging the quality of the game.
Which naturally forced us to develop the strategic, narrative-driven mind of a B2 commentator. We learned to dissect tactics, analyze the psychology of composure under pressure, and map the narrative arc of the underdog to make sense of our emotional chaos.
And finally, we took off in the helicopter. We zoomed all the way out to the C1, C2 summit, where we developed the sociological and philosophical tools to critique the global ethical machine of the sports industry. We debated the slow erosion of values and the ancient link between physical prowess and moral virtue.
What is vital to understand is that this multi-tiered progression we've traced today doesn't just apply to sports. Think about your own life listening to this. Think about how you learn. This structural evolution of vocabulary is the exact universal blueprint for how human beings master and analyze any subject in existence.
How do you mean? Like beyond sports?
Yes. Think about stepping into a new business sector, or learning a complex new technology, or even studying a new form of art. You will always, without fail, start by learning the A2 painted lines.
The basics.
You will learn the basic, objective facts and jargon of that field. Then, as you spend time with it, you will develop a B1 emotional connection. You will feel frustration or excitement or loyalty to a project.
And when you hit a roadblock, you'll need B2 language to troubleshoot. You'll need to analyze the strategy and the mechanics of why your project failed, just like analyzing a tactical breakdown on the field.
Precisely. And eventually, if you stay in that field long enough, you will engage in the C1, C2 societal critique. You will step back and ask, how does this technology I've mastered actually impact the ethics of the wider world?
Wow.
The way we learn to talk about sports is the exact way we learn to talk about the world.
That is such a powerful takeaway. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final lingering idea based on that ancient Greek concept of a sound mind and a sound body.
All right, let's hear it.
We've seen how our language surrounding a seemingly simple game inevitably, uncontrollably evolves. It starts with basic physical actions and inevitably reaches the absolute highest, most intense levels of ethical, scientific, and societal debate.
It never, ever stays just a game.
It never stays just a game. So
Okay.
Here is the provocative thought I want you to chew on today. If a game inevitably becomes a debate about ethics, integrity, and tribalism, perhaps sports were never really about physical competition at all.
Where are you going with this?
What if sports are simply a universally understood surrogate language that we invented? What if we created this massive global architecture of rules and referees just so we could safely argue about our deepest, most volatile human values like loyalty, fairness, and morality without actually having to start a war?
A surrogate battleground for the human soul. It's a fascinating possibility.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah.
I highly encourage you to listen closely to the level of language you use and the language your friends use the next time your favorite team loses a heartbreaker. Are you blaming the objective math, or are you blaming the subjective referee? You might be surprised by what your vocabulary reveals about your own psychology. Until next time, keep diving deep. So in 17th century England, a bad harvest meant Well, it meant literal starvation.
Right. It was life or death.
Yeah, exactly. A prolonged freeze or, an unrelenting drought, it didn't just ruin your weekend picnic. It totally collapsed the local economy. It sent entire communities into a literal fight for survival.
Absolutely.
But today, for most of us, a bad harvest means, maybe a slightly higher grocery bill or a temporary shortage of, our favorite imported fruit.
Yeah, maybe you can't get avocados for a week.
Right. The stakes of the weather have fundamentally shifted for the modern industrialized world. Yet, our language hasn't really caught up at all.
Not even a little bit.
We still talk about our bank accounts like we're medieval farmers trying to survive a brutal winter. We still use the sky as the ultimate metaphor for human disaster. And, you have to wonder why.
Well, because the vocabulary we use to describe our environment is the oldest, most deeply ingrained mirror we have for human consciousness.
Wow.
It's true. It tracks perfectly with our evolution. When you look at the words we use for the sky, you aren't just looking at atmospheric conditions. You are looking at a chronological map of how humanity scaled its understanding of reality.
And that is exactly what we are digging into today. Welcome to the deep dive. We're exploring a fascinating linguistic framework that tracks weather vocabulary through a progression of human thought.
It's an incredible set of sources.
It really is.
Yeah.
And our mission for you today is to follow this progression. We are starting with the absolute basics, right? The immediate sensory observations that keep us alive and, frankly, help us tolerate the strangers we're stuck with in an elevator.
The essential small talk.
Exactly. But we are going to follow that thread all the way up to the summit of complexity. We're going to look at how humans transitioned from merely surviving the weather to quantifying it, projecting it onto our psychology, and finally
negotiating the geopolitical future of the planet.
Yes, using some of the most complex terminology in human history.
It's a fascinating journey because it reveals that the weather is, it's never just the weather.
Right.
It is the ultimate human connector. We all exist underneath the exact same atmosphere. So the words we use to describe it, they dictate our daily choices, our economic structures, and ultimately how much responsibility we are willing to take for the environment we inhabit.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to begin where human experience begins, which is entirely in the present tense.
It's the immediate reality.
Right, it's purely sensory. Because before we had thermometers or satellites or global climate summits, we just had our skin in our eyes. So the foundational question of this baseline linguistic tier, according to our source material, is simple. What's the weather like today?
It really is the most primal question you can ask.
Oh, so?
Because it demands an immediate assessment of your physical surroundings. And at this baseline level of language, the A2 level, as the source categorizes it, the vocabulary is incredibly binary.
It's very black and white.
Exactly. It revolves entirely around immediate human preference and comfort. So you have good weather, which encompasses words like sunny, warm, and nice.
Right.
And you have bad weather covering rainy, cloudy, and windy.
I always find it interesting that cloudy automatically gets lumped into the bad category in these foundational linguistic guides.
It's subjective, but yeah, universally it's viewed as a lack of sun, a lack of warmth.
But what we're really looking at here is a vocabulary of immediate physical reaction, right?
Yeah.
It's the linguistic equivalent of a flinch or a sigh of relief.
That's a great way to put it.
We're bringing in the seasons too, right? Spring, summer, autumn, or fall and winter. And those simple present action verbs. The sun is shining, it is raining, it is snowing.
Exactly. But we really have to ask why this specific set of present tense binary vocabulary is the universal default for human interaction.
And that it is everywhere.
It is. Why is this the absolute foundation of small talk? Linguists and sociologists actually refer to this kind of communication as phatic communion.
Phatic communion.
Yeah, it's a term coined by anthropologist Bronislaw Malinowski back in the 1920s. And the idea is that phatic communion isn't about exchanging information. It's about fulfilling a social function.
Wait, hold on. So when I'm waiting in line for coffee, right, and I say to the person next to me, man, it's really coming down out there.
Yeah.
I'm not actually trying to inform them that it's raining.
No, not at all. They have eyes. They know it's raining.
Right. So what am I actually doing then?
You are pinging them for empathy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you are establishing baseline social trust by pointing out a shared external non-threatening reality, which is the rain. You are offering a very low-stakes invitation to agree.
So if they nod and say, yeah, I wish I brought my umbrella, what happens?
You have just achieved consensus. In evolutionary terms, you've established that you are both observing the same environment, you are experiencing the same physical reality, and crucially, you are not a threat to each other.
That is wild. That shifts the whole perspective on small talk for me.
But it's profound, isn't it?
Yeah. It's not just throwaway filler material to avoid awkward silences. It is literally a biological safety mechanism.
Precisely. It is the foundation of empathy. And the source material highlights this with a very simple dialogue exchange.
Right, the one about the cold wind.
Yes, where one person expresses a dislike for cold, windy weather, and the other agrees, pivoting to their shared preference for summer and going to the beach.
On the surface, it's mundane. It's almost boring.
But underneath, it's a vital social glue. Agreeing on the immediate physical environment is step one in cooperating as a species.
Okay, but there's a practical side to the sensory vocabulary too, isn't there? Because this basic language, it governs massive behavioral shifts.
Oh, absolutely.
Like if I look out the window and describe the day as sunny and hot, millions of people will migrate to coastlines and parks.
The whole city changes its behavior.
Right. The economy shifts toward iced drinks and outdoor dining. But if I describe it as snowing and cold, the entire machinery of a city changes.
Traffic slows down.
Commerce moves indoors. Energy grids spike because people turn on their heaters. All based on these very simple binary words.
And notice that this massive coordinated behavioral response requires absolutely no technical expertise.
That's true.
You do not need to understand atmospheric pressure or meteorology to know what the word rainy means for your afternoon plans.
You just need a raincoat.
Exactly. The sensory vocabulary is universal because the physical sensation is universal. Everyone knows what cold feels like.
But relying purely on our senses has a massive limitation, doesn't it?
It does.
If we just step outside and say, it's cold, we are totally trapped in the present moment. And let's be real, humans are notoriously terrible at staying in the present moment.
We really are.
We have this obsessive evolutionary need to know what happens next.
Which necessitates a massive leap in human language and thought. We move out of the purely sensory baseline and into the realm of quantification and prediction.
The B1 level in our source guide.
Exactly. We invent the weather forecast.
We stop asking, what is it doing right now? And start demanding to know, what is it going to do tomorrow or next week?
Right. And to do that, we can't just rely on whether our skin feels warm. We have to introduce external measurement.
So we get into degrees, Celsius or Fahrenheit.
Yes. We stop using broad strokes like hot or cold, and we introduce granularity. We start talking about a mild day or a cool breeze or temperatures dropping to freezing.
This feels like upgrading from an old 8-bit video game to high-definition reality.
That's a perfect analogy. It is a profound philosophical shift. Think about when humanity invented the thermometer.
Right, with pioneers like Galileo, Fahrenheit, Celsius.
Exactly. When that happened, we shifted the locus of truth from internal sensation to external data.
Okay, unpack that a little.
Well, cold is subjective. My version of cold might be very different from your version of cold.
Totally. I'm freezing when it's 60 degrees out.
Right. But 0 degrees Celsius is an objective mathematical reality. The language becomes granular because our relationship with the world has become analytical.
I have to push back on the actual utility of this, though.
Okay, go ahead.
Does knowing that it is exactly 0 degrees Celsius actually alter my physical reality? Like if I step outside without a coat, I'm going to shiver whether I have a thermometer in my pocket or not.
That's true.
So is this linguistic leap into precision-like differentiating between a drizzle and a heavy downpour or a gentle breeze and a strong wind, is that really about utility? Or is it just giving us an illusion of control over nature?
What's fascinating here is that the illusion of control is precisely what allows complex civilizations to function.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Granularity changes human behavior in ways that broad sensory words cannot.
Right.
Let's take precipitation, for example.
Sure.
If you are a farmer, the difference between a drizzle and a downpour isn't just a matter of whether you need a raincoat.
It's about your livelihood.
Exactly. A drizzle waters your crops gently. A downpour washes away your topsoil and ruins your season.
Okay, so the precision of the language dictates the scale of our reaction.
Yes. And look at the specific phenomena that enter the vocabulary at this level of prediction. The source brings up fog, for instance.
Right, noting that it makes it difficult to see.
It brings up thunder and lightning. These are dramatic, disruptive events. Fog obscures vision, which triggers a very primal vulnerability.
We can't navigate. We can't see predators historically. Today, We can't drive our cars safely.
Exactly. And thunder and lightning introduce awe, fear, and unpredictability into the human experience.
There's a dialogue snippet in our source material that actually perfectly captures this tension.
The one about the thunderstorm?
Yeah. Two people are talking about a thunderstorm from the night before. One person admits they were worried because the thunder was incredibly loud and the downpour was intense. Like the chaos of nature was literally shaking their house.
A very primal fear.
Right. But then the other person responds by citing the forecast. They say the forecast predicted light rain in the morning, but noted it should, quote, clear up this afternoon.
Notice the psychological function of that specific phrase. It should clear up this afternoon. It's so reassuring. The forecast acts as an emotional anchor.
It totally neutralizes the fear of the storm.
When a thunderstorm hits, nature feels chaotic. It feels random and overwhelming. Historically, that randomness was terrifying because you didn't know when it would end.
You just had to hide and hope.
Right. But because we developed the scientific ability to forecast, to map the trajectory of a storm system and confidently state, this chaos has a schedule and it will end by 3:00 p.m., we reclaim order.
That is so interesting.
The vocabulary of the forecast isn't just about planning a picnic, it is psychological armor. By quantifying the weather, we shrink the monster down to a manageable size. We are naming the beast and predicting its departure.
We are literally boxing in the chaos of the sky with numbers and timelines. Yes, it's a terrifying downpour, but it's only 15 degrees, and the radar says it will pass by Tuesday.
Precisely.
But, even predicting tomorrow or next week isn't enough, is it? Because while a forecast helps you plan a weekend, it doesn't help you build a civilization.
No, it doesn't.
To do that, we have to scale our language up again. We have to make sense of decades, not just days.
And that means we enter the realm of deep time and systemic patterns, the B2 level in our framework.
Right. The conversation must shift from local temporary conditions, like what is happening outside your window right now, to vast geographic realities.
Here's where we have to establish a critical distinction, the fundamental difference between weather and climate.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because this is where the weather stops being a purely physical phenomenon and starts infiltrating human culture. It infiltrates our architecture and our psychology. So break down that distinction for us.
Well, it is the most important distinction in atmospheric science.
Yeah.
Weather is the condition of the atmosphere over a short, immediate period. It is transient.
Like the source uses London as an example, right?
Exactly. Pointing out that London's weather is famously unpredictable. You can have sunshine, rain, and wind all in the exact same afternoon.
I've been there. It is very true.
Right. But climate, on the other hand, is the average weather pattern in a specific geographic location over a long period, usually measured in spans of 30 years or more.
So if weather is your mood on any given Tuesday, climate is your overarching personality.
That is a brilliant way to phrase it. Yes.
And to describe these long-term personalities of the planet, we developed macro-environmental vocabulary.
Tropical, desert, Arctic, temperate, subtropical.
And geography dictates destiny, doesn't it? The climate you live in fundamentally shapes the culture you produce.
Without a doubt, the source highlights a subtropical climate like Florida, characterizing it as hot and humid for most of the year.
Right.
But it also introduces the vocabulary of extreme disruption at this level. Hurricanes in the Atlantic, typhoons in the Pacific, floods, droughts, heat waves.
The source dialogue actually explores what it's like to live in a place like Florida, where you have this beautiful subtropical baseline, but you also have hurricane season.
A defined season of threat.
Yeah. The speakers talk about the nerve-wracking nature of that season, having close calls with major storms, and how it instills a deep respect for the sheer power of nature. That has to create a completely different psychological baseline than someone living in, say, a temperate climate, right?
Oh, fundamentally different. If you live in an environment where statistically the sky might try to obliterate your infrastructure once a year, the concept of impermanence is just baked into your reality.
It has to be.
Your architecture changes. You build homes with storm shutters and reinforced roofs. Your community infrastructure revolves around evacuation routes.
Your whole life has this undercurrent of readiness.
Exactly. Your relationship with the physical world is defined by a low-level, persistent awareness of your own vulnerability. You do not conquer nature in a hurricane zone. You negotiate with it.
Whereas if you live in a highly temperate zone, nature is mostly just a backdrop to your human drama.
Right. It's an inconvenience, not an existential threat.
And speaking of human drama, this brings us to my absolute favorite part of the source material.
The idioms.
Yes, this is the exact moment where the text introduces weather idioms.
The metaphorical mapping of the atmosphere onto human psychology.
I love that phrasing. We take these massive physical environmental patterns and we use them to explain our own lives.
We internalize the weather.
We really do. Let's look at the specific idioms provided in the text. When we feel slightly ill, we say we are under the weather.
Right.
When a task requires absolutely no effort, it's a breeze. A state of pure ecstasy is being on cloud nine. Saving money for a future crisis is saving for a rainy day. And a volatile, argumentative romance is a stormy relationship.
It's a rich vocabulary.
It is. I want to pause on that last one, actually. Why do we use a storm to describe intimate human conflict? Why a stormy relationship and not like a volcanic relationship or an earthquake relationship?
Because the physics of a storm perfectly mirror the psychology of human conflict.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Think about how a storm actually operates in reality. It isn't instantaneous like an earthquake. A storm requires a buildup.
The pressure drops.
Yes. Atmospheric pressure drops. Moisture accumulates. The clouds darken and gather. There is a palpable heavy period of mounting tension before the very first drop of rain falls or the lightning strikes.
You can feel it in the air.
You literally can. Then you have the explosive release of energy, the downpour, the thunder, the wind.
The argument.
Exactly. And finally, crucially, the energy dissipates. The sky clears. The pressure stabilizes.
That is staggeringly accurate to how an argument with a partner works.
It really is. So when we call a relationship stormy, we aren't just saying it's bad. We are specifically describing a cyclical pattern of building tension, explosive confrontation, and eventual temporary calm.
Wow.
We're using the immense, uncontrollable machinery of nature to validate our own emotional volatility. It suggests that our tempers, much like the weather, are vast forces that we are subject to rather than entirely in control of.
It almost absolves us a little bit, doesn't it? Like, I'm not unreasonable, I'm just caught in a low-pressure system of emotion.
Exactly. It's humanizing.
And what about saving for a rainy day? The source simply defines this as saving money for a difficult time in the future. But if we trace the roots of that phrase, we are going right back to what we talked about at the very beginning of the show.
Back to the medieval farmer.
Right.
It is a direct linguistic fossil of agrarian survival. For the vast majority of human history, our entire economic output was tied to the soil, which meant it was entirely dependent on the sky.
Right. There was no separation.
None. A rainy day, specifically prolonged unseasonal bad weather, meant you could not harvest. It meant the crops rotted in the field.
It meant you literally had nothing to eat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you had not accumulated a surplus of grain during the sunny, productive days, a rainy season was a death sentence.
That wasn't just a metaphor then.
No, it was literal. The trauma of seasonal crop failure was so deeply ingrained in the human psyche that long after we moved off the farms and into industrialized cities, the metaphor just remained.
The physical threat of the rain seamlessly transitioned into the abstract threat of financial ruin.
Yes. We took the literal wrath of the sky and applied it to our bank accounts. It shows that we don't view ourselves as separate from the weather. We use it as the ultimate shared context for what it means to be a human being.
Which, honestly, makes the final transition in our linguistic guide so incredibly jarring.
We reached the summit of linguistic complexity, the C1 and C2 level in language learning.
We move from using the weather as a quaint cultural metaphor to recognizing it as a systemic, existential reality that we are actively altering.
The stakes become absolute.
Yeah. The vocabulary at this level upgrades to match the absolute highest stakes possible. We are no longer just talking about the weather, we are talking about the survival of the planet.
We are transitioning from observation and metaphor into the language of complex science and high-stakes geopolitics.
And before we dive into the political mechanisms behind this vocabulary, let's look at the meteorological science the text introduces. Because we're far beyond the concept of a drizzle or a cool breeze now.
We are looking at the engines of the atmosphere.
Exactly. We are now looking at the invisible forces that drive the entire system. High pressure and low pressure systems. Jet streams. Cold fronts.
Right.
Can you break down why these specific terms are so critical? Because I feel like to a lot of people, when the meteorologist on the news starts talking about a low pressure system, their eyes just kind of glaze over. What is actually happening physically?
It's actually beautiful simple once you understand the physics of it. Atmospheric pressure is literally the weight of the air pressing down on the earth.
The actual physical weight.
Yes. A high-pressure system means the air is heavy and sinking, and as air sinks, it warms up, which prevents clouds from forming. That's why high pressure almost always brings clear, sunny, good weather.
So when the air is pushing down, the clouds literally can't rise and condense.
Exactly, they are suppressed. A low-pressure system is the exact inverse. The air is rising, and as it rises, it cools, the moisture within it condenses into clouds, and eventually it falls as rain or snow.
So low pressure is the engine of bad weather and storms.
Yes, it is the lifting mechanism. And steering all of this are the jet streams.
The text mentions those too.
Right, they are massive, fast-moving rivers of air high up in the troposphere. They're created by the temperature contrast between the cold poles and the warm equator, combined with the rotation of the Earth.
Okay, and the text gives a specific example sentence here that I want to look at. It says, the meteorologist explained that the cold front is expected to bring a sharp drop in temperatures.
A very standard C1 level sentence.
Right, but why is it always a sharp drop? Like, what is a cold front actually doing in the sky?
A cold front is the leading edge of a massive, dense mass of cold air. Because cold air is denser and heavier than warm air, when a cold front moves into an area, it acts like a wedge.
A wedge.
Yeah, it literally shoves its way underneath the existing warm, moist air, forcing that warm air violently upward.
Oh, wow.
And that violent upward motion is why cold fronts don't just gently drop the temperature. They often trigger severe thunderstorms right along the boundary line.
So we've moved from looking at the pretty clouds to looking at the massive, invisible thermodynamics of the entire atmosphere.
Exactly.
But the most critical topic introduced at this advanced level isn't just how the weather works. It's how the weather is changing.
Yes.
We move into the vocabulary of climate change and global warming. And there is one word in the source material that completely shifts the paradigm of human history.
Anthropogenic.
Anthropogenic.
Derived from the Greek roots anthropos, meaning human, and genesis, meaning origin or creation.
Caused by humans.
Caused by humans.
I want to stop and really think about the philosophical weight of that word. For thousands of years, as we've discussed today, humanity viewed the weather as something that happened to us.
It was an external force.
Right. It was the realm of the gods. It was Jupiter throwing thunderbolts. It was an uncontrollable, chaotic force that we just had to survive, or maybe predict if we were lucky, or use as a metaphor for our love lives. So, does using the word anthropogenic, like sitting in a boardroom and discussing anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions, does that abstract the sky so much that we lose our connection to it? Do we lose the sensory reality of the rain on our faces when we intellectualize it this much?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the exact opposite is true.
Really?
Yes. The word anthropogenic is the ultimate tragic realization of our connection to nature. It doesn't sever the connection at all. It redefines the power dynamic.
Okay, explain that.
We are no longer passive observers huddled in a cave hoping the storm passes. The word forces us to acknowledge that we are active participants in the global atmospheric system. We are the architects of the climate.
We are the gods throwing the thunderbolts now, but we don't know how to aim them.
That is a chillingly accurate way to put it. Exactly, and the vocabulary outlines the specific mechanisms of our new reality.
Right. The text explicitly discusses the emission of greenhouse gases, primarily carbon dioxide, resulting from the burning of fossil fuels.
And it notes the overwhelming scientific consensus that these anthropogenic emissions are the primary driver of modern climate change.
And the language doesn't just describe the cause, right? It catalogs the cascading, devastating effects. We aren't talking about a ruined harvest in one medieval village anymore.
The scale is planetary.
We are talking about rising sea levels, the increasing frequency and intensity of extreme weather events.
Those hurricanes and heat waves we discussed earlier are being supercharged by the trapped heat.
Right. We're talking about the total disruption of global ecosystems.
And the source uses a very deliberate, powerful word to describe one of these effects. It points to the melting of the polar ice caps as a stark visual representation of the accelerating pace of global warming.
Stark. I love that word choice in the text. I mean, severe, bare, unadorned. It's a word that strips away any deniability.
Yes.
Because you can argue about statistical models all day long, but you cannot argue with the stark visual reality of a disappearing glacier.
You can see it with your own eyes. And because the reality is stark, the language of our response must be equally robust and action-oriented.
Which brings us to the ultimate function of this high-level vocabulary, geopolitical negotiation.
Yes.
Now, I want to make something very clear for you listening. When we talk about things like a carbon tax or the Paris Agreement, we are entering the realm of highly debated global policy.
Very politically charged topics.
Exactly. And we are looking at this vocabulary exactly as it is presented in the source text. We are examining the words used by policymakers around the world to grapple with these realities. We aren't taking a side or endorsing a specific policy. We are just imparting the framework provided in the material.
Impartially reporting the language of the debate.
Exactly. So the text introduces international frameworks like the Paris Agreement and policy mechanisms like the carbon tax, investments in renewable energy like solar and wind, and the overarching goal of sustainability.
And the text points out that navigating this global debate requires absolute precision between two distinct philosophical approaches: mitigation and adaptation.
This is where language translates directly into the survival strategy of our species. Mitigation and adaptation are not synonyms, are they?
Not at all. They are entirely different trajectories for the future.
Let's break them down, starting with mitigation.
Mitigation focuses on the root cause. It is the effort to reduce or prevent the emission of greenhouse gases in the first place.
So switching from a coal plant to a solar farm, that is mitigation.
Yes. Implementing a carbon tax to disincentivize fossil fuel use. That is mitigation. It is the attempt to pump the brakes on the warming process.
And adaptation.
Adaptation is the reluctant acceptance of reality.
That sounds heavy.
It is. It means acknowledging that a certain degree of climate change is already locked in. The sea levels are rising. The storms are getting stronger. Therefore, we must adapt our infrastructure and societies to survive the new baseline.
So things like abandoning coastal developments or engineering drought-resistant crops and building massive seawalls around coastal cities, that is adaptation.
Yes. The source encapsulates this tension with a very powerful sentence. It says, quote, "The debate has shifted from merely acknowledging the problem to implementing tangible mitigation and adaptation strategies on a global scale."
Tangible, meaning
Right.
real, physical, something you can touch.
Yes.
That is the ultimate magic trick of this C1 and C2 vocabulary, isn't it? We are taking the most massive, invisible, abstract concepts imaginable, atmospheric thermodynamics, carbon molecules, global temperature averages, and we are trying to wrestle them down into tangible, legal, and economic strategies.
We are literally trying to turn the sky into policy.
Because we have to.
Exactly. This level of language is what allows humanity to coordinate on a planetary scale. When diplomats sit down at the United Nations, they aren't engaging in phatic communion. They aren't saying, "Wow, it's hot today, isn't it?" just to build empathy. They are using the precise language of anthropogenic climate change to negotiate the future habitability of the globe.
So let's step back and look at the absolute magnitude of the journey we just took today.
It's a huge spectrum.
We started this deep dive down to the sensory baseline, looking at the simple, binary human experience of hot and cold, good and bad.
The A2 level.
Right. We saw how a shared complaint about the rain forms the bedrock of social trust and empathy.
And from there, we elevated into quantification. We learned how the invention of the thermometer and the forecast allowed us to measure the present and predict the future.
Giving us that crucial psychological anchor against the chaos of nature.
Exactly.
Then we zoomed out into deep time, distinguishing between unpredictable weather and long-term climate. We unpacked the agrarian trauma hidden inside our idioms, realizing that when we save for a rainy day or weather a stormy relationship, we're using the atmosphere to validate the human condition.
And finally, we ascended to the summit of geopolitical reality. We confronted the word anthropogenic, accepting our role as active participants in the climate system, and explored the stark realities of mitigation and adaptation.
We followed the vocabulary of the weather, from a casual nod at a bus stop to the drafting tables of international climate accords. And what blows my mind is that it is all connected.
Every single piece of it.
Every single time you engage in that seemingly mundane small talk about the weather, you are standing at the edge of a massive, interconnected global system.
The words you choose, whether you're hoping the fog clears or debating the tangible effects of a carbon tax, they reflect exactly where you stand in relation to reality.
It reminds us that language is never static. It is a living tool that evolves out of sheer necessity.
Absolutely.
Which leaves me with one final, deeply provocative thought that really builds on our text today. Well, if our language has evolved this radically, if we've gone from simply grunting in relief when the sun comes out, to inventing degrees Celsius, to arguing over anthropogenic mitigation strategies, what is the weather vocabulary of the next century going to look like?
Oh, that is a fascinating question.
Right. As we actually live through the consequences of the policies we are debating right now. As the baseline climate continues to shift beneath our feet, what entirely new words will future generations be forced to invent just to make small talk?
It's going to be a completely different vocabulary.
Will they have 50 different nuances for a heat wave? Will sunny still be the universal default for good weather? Or, I don't know, in a hotter world, will cloudy become the new cultural ideal?
We will have to wait and see.
We will. So what does this all mean for you? Next time you are standing in an elevator or waiting for a video call to start, and you look out the window to find a safe, easy word to break the silence, remember, you aren't just looking at the weather, you're looking at the whole world.